Hello there. So if everyone is ready, we can start. Okay. Well, thank you for joining this webinar. I'm joining you from our EXO travel office in Tokyo. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'd like to focus on luxury travel Japan. Before, maybe a brief recap on what do we do at EXO Japan. We have been operating as a DMC in this country since 2011. We have our main office in Tokyo as well as an office in Kyoto, a total of 120 staff altogether. Like many other EXO destinations, we focus on customized FIT trips. We also do offer a full range of EXO product and EXO brand in Japan as well. Groups and MICE, these account for approximately 20% of our business here in Japan. We operate adventure tours under the EXO Adventure brand. Are one of the key destinations also for LUXE by EXO brand that you can see here, the luxury division of EXO Travel with a dedicated LUXE by EXO team here in Japan, which accounts for around 10 consultants and operations staff. So my aim today is to provide you with some ideas, inspirations, tools to customize luxury trips to Japan. My team and I have been putting together some sample itineraries that we think can be a great starting point for anyone who wants to start customizing their trips to Japan. They will be on our website for you to download. There's no time for me to go through each one of them in detail, but I would like to go through some of what I think are the most interesting features in terms of accommodations, and particularly boutique accommodations, which is a kind of a new concept in Japan. So in terms of tours and services, as well as a few operational tips for LUXE. First service that is always included in all our FIT itineraries is the meet and greet assistance and the transfer to the accommodation. Then we have a huge variety of different levels of services for this apparently simple service. Something that many luxury guests were asking in the past, but until recently was not possible here in Japan, was the VIP assistance at the airport. Means assistance from before the baggage claim and customs, and VIP access through passport control. So this is indeed possible in Japan now, and we are offering this service for more of our LUXE guests late. Private vehicles. As you may be aware, this is one of those luxury services that can have a heavy impact on the final costs for an itinerary. Private cars with drivers are an expensive service in Japan. I should say though that the service level is really impeccable and probably one of the highest quality in the world. Depending on the budget, our cars can go from Toyota Crown, Lexus, Mercedes Maybach, BMW, even up to Rolls-Royce. Even though, of course, the cost difference among the models is quite noticeable. I should say though that in our experience, ends are the way to go for transport transfers to and from airports. This is because LUXE guests are likely to travel with more luggage than regular guests. Japan is not the most flexible country in the world, and each vehicle has strict rules on number of passengers, luggage that can be boarded, so hence are the safest option when luggage is involved. Station transfers and airport transfers. For LUXE, we can, here in Tokyo, we can upgrade the Toyota Alphas to Benz vans. And again, in Japan, private professionality is extremely high. Nice uniforms, white gloves, English-speaking drivers are available. Important, drivers cannot be guides in Japan, though they're two separate jobs and don't have driving guides. For the right guests, we can also include a concierge on board. We can make sure that luxury guests receive the right flexibility in service. In Japan is unfortunately not always universally guaranteed. That's why for our LUXE guests, we like to offer a concierge service during a transfer, so that we make sure that the right assistance and the right flexibility is provided. Accommodation. In Tokyo, and particularly for our art and culture itinerary, we do recommend boutique property such as the Hotel Gajoen. So, Hotel Gajoen Tokyo is part of the small luxury hotels of the world, but you may not notice really at the beginning when you just arrive at the hotel. This is because the structure is quite imposing. This is actually Hotel Gajoen used to be and still is one of the top-end venues for Japanese traditional weddings here in Tokyo. But the moment that you take a very nice lacquerware elevator that takes you to the hotel lobby, that's where you do feel that you're in a small boutique hotel. This property only has 60 rooms. All of them are suites. Unlike many other hotels, the Gajuen does not have a panoramic view of the city, but anyway, guests will be able to enjoy many panoramic views of the city from, for example, the many high-end restaurants and bars that this city offers. But the view is actually on the Meguro River, which is one of the best spots for cherry blossom viewing in the city. And also, the rooms have a view on the neighboring residential area, which is quite higher end. So it's a quite beautiful local town within a huge city like Tokyo. I mentioned that all the rooms are suites. This means that room size begins at 80 square meters. Which is pretty much unheard of, really, in Tokyo. Normally, five-star properties in Tokyo, entry-level rooms will start at 45 to 50 square meters. So this allows also Hotel Gajuen to accept up to 4 guests in all rooms, which is also quite unique for a hotel in Tokyo. It's quite ideal for families, really. Otherwise, often we would need to go for the connecting room option, which again in Tokyo is not necessarily the easiest thing to find, as connecting rooms are not as common as maybe in other cities. On arrival day, we recommend to all our LUXE guests to have an orientation with our guide. This is also because we want to allow, of course, guests to understand the surroundings of the accommodation, allow guests to have recommendations for good bars, cool things to do in the area, but also because we want to receive updates about the guests from the guide. So we want to make sure that we can intervene and that our operations team and our customer care team can help. In case guests have preferences or requests, we can, survey right on the first day through our guide who does the orientation. So arrival day actually is often tough for our guests because many of them are coming from a 10-plus hour flight if they're coming from Europe or North America or South America. So Japanese restaurant at Gajuen could be a great introduction to Japanese cuisine and also allow guests not to, they don't need to go out and leave the property for dinner on the day they get to Tokyo. As it is customary to the high-end Japanese traditional restaurants, this restaurant only offers private rooms, all of which have tatami flooring. Chairs can be also provided, and guests who want to have the real Japanese experience can instead sit on the tatami flooring. So there is a hole under the table, so that actually you can keep your legs just like you were sitting on a chair, even though you're sitting on the floor, on the tatami floor. So it's actually just as comfortable as a chair. Kaiseki cuisine can be enjoyed at this restaurant. Kaiseki style meal is a composition of many dishes, often 8 to 10 dishes, and they're served on small plates, and both the food arrangements as well as the dish themselves are real art. The Kaiseki cuisine does give lots of attention to the details, to the presentation, and it's also one of the most famous styles of cuisine here in Japan, and it's also a great way to try different culinary traditions, because in a kaiseki meal you often have a good variety of well-known dishes, such as sashimi, tempura, Japanese noodles, but they're all served in an ultra-refined way. On day 2, we like to introduce Tokyo through a guided tour, which includes generally both some of the main highlights of Tokyo, but also some of the less known sites. Transportation, again, can be a broad variety of private cars. In this case, as guests will not be traveling with their luggage, we would privilege luxury sedans so Lexus or Mercedes instead of Benz. So a way to enhance the experience during a sightseeing tour like this one is to include a very exclusive lunch at a small hidden gem restaurant in the Ginza district. This is one of the upscale shopping and dining district, Ginza. All around this restaurant you can find skyscrapers, but right hidden by the skyscraper you find this small Japanese-style wooden house. Inside, all the dining rooms are private, and normally the restaurant is open for business only in the evening, so lunch experience here is particularly exclusive because it's only open to guests that are recommended. So at one of the private Japanese-style rooms, guests here will be able to have a very insightful sushi-making lesson with one of the local chefs, while they hear the story of this small restaurant that actually has been around since way before all the skyscrapers grew in the area. So this is a great way to really add an insider access experience to our site, to any of our sightseeing tours in Tokyo, while also adding a great sushi lunch and also offering a kind of sushi making experience that is really both authentic and high-end. While in the rest of Tokyo lately, this type of sushi making activities are becoming a bit too touristy. This one is pretty much exclusive and unique. Something we also do recommend in the evening of the first full day in Tokyo is one of our food tours. For guests staying at Gajoen, we'd recommend the one that takes place in Meguro. This is the neighborhood of Hotel Gajoen, which, as I mentioned before, it's a rather high-end residential district with lots of very good and elegant local restaurants and bars. It's really important to have a guide to introduce our guests to the local dining scene. And in Japan, this is one of the most fun and actually interesting aspects to explore, and yet it's a difficult one to approach. Most of the coolest dining venues and bars here in Japan are very small places. They're hidden in small alleyways. They may be hidden behind wooden doors, behind paper windows. All the menus, the info may only be displayed in Japanese. So it's difficult to approach these venues for a foreign guest who has just come to Japan. But yet, this is a great part of the Japanese culture, and while for our luxury guests we are super happy to do our best to help and arrange top-end restaurants, Michelin star restaurants, the best dining scene, our concept of luxury also wants to include experiencing local dining venues that are not luxury per se, maybe, but it's indeed a luxury experience to access venues that are very authentic, far from the main tourist radar, and being able to see both the top-end culinary tradition as well as the authentic day-to-day one. Guys that are focusing on these tours, they only operate food tours and dining scene related tours, so they're very fun people to hang with. These tours give our guests also great tools to enjoy the nightlife on their own if they have evening at leisures later in the itinerary. The guide will give them tips on how to understand what kind of cuisine a restaurant is offering, what to expect from a restaurant even though you cannot read the menu, how to order drinks, all these kind of tips that you need to being able to access and enjoy the Japanese food scene on your own as well. Guests who do prefer a top-end dining experience at one of the best restaurants may still be interested in joining our whiskey adventure tour after dinner. This tour is run by a foreign expert with a very long history of living in Japan, more than 15 years. And This tour takes places to local, again, not necessarily luxury venues per se, but very impressive whiskey bars hidden in small alleyways where guests can enjoy 6 different types of very refined Japanese whiskies. Some of these are discontinued bottles, which means that it's a unique opportunity. Once that bottle is over, that whiskey is over forever. Lots of people associate Japan with sake, and of course it's the case. Japanese are famous for sake, but actually the history of whiskey production in Japan is extremely long, more than 100 years. And actually Japanese whiskey is seeing now a huge increase in popularity. And this is, of course, because also the quality of the product is extremely high. So, again, LUXE guests that are interested in this side of the Japanese culture can enjoy amazing whiskey with a whiskey expert VIP guide after dinner. After a broad introduction of Tokyo on the first full day, on the following day we may want to take guests much deeper under the surface of the city. Optional tours. The art tour, the architecture tour that we are operating, again with another VIP guide who used to manage one of the art galleries here in Tokyo. Guests more interested in crafts might want to take a very exclusive private visit to one of the oldest katana shops or one of the oldest katana sword makers here in Tokyo. For those that are interested in the more traditional cultural side of Japan, well, then they can assist to a kabuki performance with a kabuki expert. Even more complex than kabuki is no theater, actually. We're able to offer private access to a very old no theater in central Tokyo, where guests can meet the owner. They can see the masks, the costumes used during the performances. They can also witness a private performance with the explanation of an expert. So, this is just an idea of the many choices we can give to give quite some insider access to our LUXE guests. For guests who wish to spend more time in Tokyo, a day trip to the nearby city of Kamakura, full of beautiful temples, shrines, also cherry trees that bloom on an earlier date than all the others in Japan, that can be a good option. Or guests who want to take their time seeing the city at their own pace, for them we can offer a private car that is on standby, with an English-speaking driver or a concierge guide on board. So this way, guests can arrange visits, shoppings, other experiences depending on their preference. Of course, in this not very flexible country, planning beforehand is quite beneficial. But for luxury guests who prefer taking a day at leisure and go with the flow, then this combination of a private guide and private car on standby is probably the most effective. After Tokyo, guests will be traveling to the next destinations. Now, all city-to-city transfers in Japan are by train. All trains have at least 2 traveling classes. That's the standard class, and then the so-called green class, which we can compare to the business class on a plane. The newest bullet trains also have a third class. It's not really third class, it's actually called the grand class, which we can compare to the first class of a plane. So about trains, a common issue that we see is receiving requests for rail passes for luxury guests, which I'm afraid it simply doesn't work. Japan does offer rail passes for visiting foreigners, and these can bring quite some noticeable savings on the overall rail transfer cost for an itinerary. But for luxury guests, we need to foresee that travelers will be likely wanting to be dropped off and picked up from all train stations by a private car and by a private assistant. So in order to offer this service, we absolutely need to make sure that the guests are traveling with point-to-point tickets so that we can make sure that the assistant and the driver will be waiting for the guests on the right platform in front of the right train car. If guests are traveling with a rail pass, we would not be able to know on which car they're traveling on. And most of the bullet train, they actually have 16 cars, so they're very long trains. If we don't let the driver or the assistant know on what car the guests are traveling, then we might not be able for them to meet. In some cases, if the guests are traveling with a rail pass, we don't even know what train they're riding. So definitely for all luxury guests that we need to provide a private transfer service to and from the station. Point-to-point tickets is the way to go. There are destinations where guests need to change trains at least once to reach the final destination. For example, transfers like Tokyo to the city of Takayama. In that case, one transfer in Nagoya will be needed. Luxury guests sometimes do request an assistant to change trains. So an assistant that meets them at the station where they're changing train, meets them on the platform where they arrive with the train, and then helps them transfer to the new train and helps them make sure that they board the right train, and then they use the right ticket. So this is indeed possible, and it's actually much more reasonably priced than having a guide to travel with them for the whole trip. So having an assistant just for the change train part is also possible, and is actually becoming more and more common for our LUXE guests. So Kyoto. After Tokyo, this is the second most common destination, and it's a must for all first-timers to Japan. Just like Tokyo, the average stay here is between 3 and 5 nights. Three properties that I'd like to mention in Kyoto. The 1000 Kyoto. This is a very new property, just opened, and a very long-awaited real boutique hotel in Kyoto. In Kyoto, the boutique concept really had been lacking options until now. The property is just outside Kyoto Station, so it's ideal for guests that get to Kyoto by bullet train. It offers a very zen, very intriguing design. Rooms start at 37 square meters, so slightly smaller than your average 5-star hotel in Japan. But the upgraded rooms and the suites are, of course, much more spacious, and they really offer a great combination between zen design, Japanese themes, and Western comfort. So it's really the ideal property for the design lovers. Great food as well. Excellent Japanese and excellent Italian restaurant within the property. The Four Seasons Kyoto, this is our go-to property for all full luxury. It has amazing open-air spaces. Guests can enjoy a beautiful zen garden away from the crowds of Kyoto. This hotel is actually a recent addition as well. But the luxury hotel landscape in Kyoto has been developing super quickly. At least one luxury hotel has been opening in Kyoto every year for the last few years, and this year there is more with the Park Hyatt, with the Aman. So this is really a city that can be of interest for luxury hotel lovers. The Suiran. This is a very small boutique property. It's located in Arashiyama. It's a district that is 20 to 30 minutes away from central Kyoto, but it is a very famous area. There's a UNESCO World Heritage Temple located here. It's called the Tenryuji. There is also the very famous Arashiyama Bamboo Forest, one of the most magical sites in Kyoto. Now, the Suiran is ideal for guests who want to enjoy the district of Arashiyama without too many crowds. So if you're staying here, then it's likely that you can enjoy the area in the later afternoon or evening times where the crowds tend to leave. Also at that time, there are many high-end restaurants opening all along the river, so the area feels much more relaxed, much more authentic, just as it used to be before the big inbound boom of Japan. The suiran is also a great combination of Japanese concepts. Most of the rooms have a lotemburo, so it's a Japanese bathtub made of hinoki wood on the outside terrace. Parts of the room are covered in tatami flooring, lots of Japanese elements, but at the same time, lots of Western-style comfort. So Western-style beds, living spaces. So it's a great balance, really, between the two cultures, between the West and Japan. Ideal for guests who want to enjoy a more relaxed side of Kyoto. Here in Kyoto, I would like to promote our Taste of Gion tour. That's the higher-end, enhanced version of our food tour in Kyoto. This tour takes our guests to beautiful dining venues, great Japanese modern design, also some very small local pubs with great sake, super high quality sake, and the tour finishes off with an excellent bar with an incredible selection of gins and whiskies, both made in Japan, and also has great signature cocktails. Let's move on to another area. This area, Seto-Ushi region, has always been very attractive for art lovers, and more it's becoming loved by our luxury travelers. One of the most famous destinations here is Naoshima, the so-called Art Island. In recent times, this island has quickly moved from being an island of fishermen to being an open-air museum featuring great museums of contemporary arts, but also art installations that are spread throughout the island, both by Japanese and foreign artists. Now, Naoshima is becoming more and more popular among foreign visitors, and of course, beyond the guests that are staying at the famous Benesse House, which is the most famous accommodation on the island, quite a few people are now coming to the island as a day trip. Very few people know, though, that the Seto-Ushi Art Island is not just one. There are actually more, but very few people tend to visit them for the simple reason that the ferry connection are not as easy as the ferry connections to Naoshima. So islands like Teshima or Inujima, they're equally interesting, and our LUXE guests can have the option of accessing these islands quite in style by a private yacht who will pick them up from Naoshima or the mainland and take them on a day trip to these two lesser-known islands. A guide, concierge on board, bikes for the island of Teshima, or for guests who prefer a private car, champagne on board, cocktails at sunset while sailing back to Naoshima, dinner on board are all some possible features that we can offer to customize the experience depending on the guest's need. Finally, to reiterate the concept really that luxury is not only a fancy hotel, but it's also about having access to very authentic, very exclusive experiences, I'd like to talk briefly about two further destinations. The Kiso Valley, which is right in the center of Japan, has made great progress in recent times. It is now one of our most recommended ryokan destinations. By ryokan, I mean Japanese style accommodation. This is the ideal destination, really, if you want to experience this concept of accommodation. While Hakone is the most famous ryokan destination, it is also the easiest one to access from Tokyo. It is also the one destination in Japan that is probably seeing the strongest impact from over-tourism lately. It is often requested in itineraries because it's the gateway to Mount Fuji. It's the area where Mount Fuji can be seen, but we should say not the only area. But, you know, the places in Hakone which are the best viewing spots for Mount Fuji, like the ropeway to Mount Owakudani, the Lake Ashi, they're actually incredibly crowded all year long. guests staying in 5-star accommodation even will have little alternative to the crowds if they want to access these viewpoints. Of course, properties like the Gora Kadan are top-notch, but we also see that luxury guests do like going off the beaten track as long as we can guarantee specific standards. And lately in Kiso Valley, we are able to offer private transfers to and from the stations, to and from the hiking sites, as well as private guides. So we're making the region much more accessible for our luxury guests. Accommodation-wise, the ryokans that we recommend are Uradstaya and Kazari. Both are offering a very authentic feel and yet a very comfortable stay. For guests who are not up for the challenge to sleep on a futon, as you can see here, Uradstaya has a Western beds room, which also has a very Japanese ambience. So it's a great fit for guests who prefer, a very Japanese accommodation, but keeping Western beds. So the Kiso Valley is indeed a bit further out compared to Hakone, but it is for sure worth spending that extra hour on a train to visit a much more local area. The ideal pattern for luxury guests would be to spend 2 nights in the Kiso Valley, specifically in the town of Kiso Fukushima. And here they can use the full day to hike the Nakasendo Trail. This is the old road that used to connect Kyoto and Tokyo in ancient times. A section of this road is still extremely well preserved, and it's a simple 3-hour hike that anybody who is okay with walking a few hours, 1 hour slightly steep and then 2 hours downhill, will find it accessible. So the towns on the Nakasendo Trail are also extremely beautiful to explore, and the private transfer service from the area to the ryokans make sure that luxury guests will be able to make the most of their time, so they don't need to spend time sorting out transportation. They just can enjoy a private transferring great comfort back to the ryokan after the hike. The town of Kiso Fukushima itself actually offers quite a few interesting historical sites, and these can be a great B plan in case the weather makes it impossible to hike the Nakasendo Trail. Kiso Fukushima also has a few good local bars that are open till late night, and I think this is a great plus for our Western guests because when guests are staying in a ryokan, they will likely finish dinner around 8 p.m. because dinner is often served early, and then there is not much to do in a ryokan except for enjoying the onsen hot spring baths, which is great, but likely our guests will not want to do this the whole evening. So we find that having a ryokan in an area where you can go out and explore the local town and the local bars can be more interesting even on this side compared to Hakone, which is actually spread. All the ryokans in Hakone are spread on a much broader area, and pretty much nothing stays open until late evening in Hakone. One final note about a few great tours that we have in Lake Biwa. This is just 20 minutes outside of Kyoto and a completely different landscape and environment compared to Kyoto. It really takes just a short train ride, or for our luxury guests, a short private car ride, to leave the crowds of Kyoto behind and to reach the shores of Lake Biwa, Japan's biggest lake. And here tourism is still extremely minor. Then again, not necessarily a luxury experience by itself, but it's a way to experience a destination and to meet people that you would never be able to do without a guide. So again, adding lots of value through curated tours with an insider. Lake Biwa is It's a very old style Japan landscape. Rice fields, wooden houses all over. Here our guests can take a nice electric bike ride along the shores. They can visit one of the local farmers for a local lunch prepared together with the host. Kids can have fun making mochi sweets. It's Japanese sweets made of sweet rice paste, which is hit with this huge hammer. Also, for higher-end guests, we also recommend the wellness side of Lake Biwa with yoga and Pilates lessons that can be organized in this very authentic and calm side of Japan. So, this was just an introduction on some of the boutique properties, some of the tours, some of the services that we recommend for our luxury guests, ways to combine them together. LUXE, of course, also means flexibility, means customization. We have a LUXE team that is ready to find the right fit for any of our guests' requests. If you have any question, any information that you may need about our Japan products, feel free to write me anytime. This is my email. If you have any question now, feel free to also write them in the system and I'll get back to you separately. Thanks for your time. Have a nice day.